My name's Kamara Chambers, and I am the Director of Leadership Development at the Dais. For those of you who don't know the Dais and are new to us, we are a think tank based at Toronto Metropolitan University. Our name means raised platform, and the Dais is a place that illuminates the people on it. For us, it reminds us that real change only happens when we lift up new voices and new ideas. Our mission as a think tank is to connect people to the ideas and power we need to build a more inclusive, innovative, and prosperous Canada. From our home base at TMU, our team is dedicated to advancing an inclusive and innovative economy and democracy in Canada across three preliminary areas of specialization: innovation and tech, education and skills, and democracy and trust. Before we begin today's event, I would like to give the land acknowledgement. We do this as a symbolic restorative act, one of many to follow, part of a wider and hopefully transformative reconciliation project here at TMU. Those joining us here in Toronto, which is where I am today, are located in Takaronto, which is a Mohawk word that describes a place in the water where the trees are standing. TMU is on the territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. It is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, Treaty Number 13, and the Williams Treaties. We are committed to honoring our obligations to these nations, treaties, and to give justice to Indigenous peoples generally. We also acknowledge and pay tribute to those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. We honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent who also continue to live the impacts of colonization in solidarity with many Indigenous peoples. Today, we'd like to thank the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, who have sponsored this series and who this series wouldn't be possible without. This anti-racism series was dreamed up by our staff team a number of months ago, and this session in particular is particularly important. We're keen to have a timely and crucial conversation today about the pressing issue of Islamophobia online. The tragic events taking place in the Middle East are a horrific reminder of the importance of tackling this issue here at home and abroad. Now, before we start the panel, we would like to begin with a few housekeeping reminders. Firstly, we encourage you to engage with questions. Please submit your questions via the Zoom Q&A function that you'll see towards the bottom of your screen. We'd love to hear from you. We will be having a short 5-minute intermission at 7 p.m. And at that point, you can stretch and maybe grab a cup of tea. And then we do want to try to prioritize answering as many questions as possible, and we'll do our best to get through them, but we may not cover them all. The questions that are submitted before the break are more likely to be addressed. So we encourage you to tell us what you'd like to ask the panelists before the break. Now, I'm delighted to introduce the moderator for today's panel, our very own Managing Director, Sam Andrey. Sam has led public policy development throughout his career in government, nonprofit advocacy, and academia. As Managing Director of the Dais, Sam is responsible for coordinating its policy, leadership development, and operations teams. He also teaches public policy and leadership at Toronto Metropolitan University and also at George Brown College. Before joining TMU as the Leadership Lab's Director of Policy and Research, Sam held a number of roles advancing equity in education. He was the Chief of Staff and Director of Policy to the Ontario Minister of Education, the Policy Manager for the Ontario Student Assistance Programme, and also the Executive Director of the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining from home. We're thrilled to have you. I think this is going to be, a really important dialogue when we set this up and invited our speakers. The timing of, the horrific events taking place in Israel and Gaza, we obviously didn't know that was going to be happening, but, it's obviously added a heavy layer to this discussion, and I just want to acknowledge that and thank our speakers still for being here when I know there's a lot going on, and likewise to our participants. We're eager to hear from you and answer your questions. So I'm going to start just by introducing our panel. We're hoping to dig in today, to the pressing issue of Islamophobia online, in particular, perpetuating stereotypes, misinformation, hate speech, and what we can really do about that, and what are potential policy changes and policy solutions to counter online hate and racism towards Muslim communities. And I'm thrilled about our panel tonight. I'm going to introduce them one at a time, and then they're going to have a few minutes to say some opening words. But first is Firdaus Ali. She is an active voice on diversity and inclusion, and has led several health and gender equity initiatives for national and provincial organizations, including the Heart and Stroke Foundation, the Alliance for South Asian AIDS Prevention, and Osteoporosis Canada. She's also worked as a journalist in Mumbai, India, and is currently working for the Canadian Council of Muslim Women as a project manager, leading the Digital Anti-Racism Education Program, or DARE, which we're going to learn more about tonight. In that role, she aims to educate and empower communities about how they can be effective allies in countering hate and racism and Islamophobia. Firdaus believes in blending creative programming and media awareness to open dialogues on important issues like racism, feminism, and gender-based violence. And we're excited to have you, Firdaus. Thanks for being here. And then with her is Shawn, who's a government relations officer at the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Raised in Alberta, he's dedicated his career to public service and studied public relations at the University of Victoria. Motivated by his own personal experiences of racism and Islamophobic hate, Shawn's on a mission to dispel stereotypes and discrimination against Muslims and minority communities. In 2017, he launched a blog to foster understanding and humanize the perception of Muslims. He also served as the board coordinator for the Oscars Film Festival, where he worked alongside others to reshape public perceptions of Muslims through showcasing Muslim talent in film. Shawn is a passionate advocate for human rights, especially marginalized communities worldwide. He envisions a world free from hate, working to create a brighter future for the next generation. His dedication and advocacy make him a prominent voice against online Islamophobic hate speech. Couldn't think of a better panel to get into this discussion tonight. I am going to open up now the floor to both of them to give some opening remarks. And just a note for the audience that there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen that you can enter questions in. We'll be taking them kind of throughout the night, and we'll weave them into the program. So Firdaus, we're going to start it off with you. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Sam, and good evening to all of you, depending on where you are. It may be afternoon, I'm not sure. But really, really excited to be here today. To talk about, Islamophobia and how it kind of transcends to online hate. Also wanting to recognize that we are really living in absolutely difficult times. It's really not easy to talk about this. I will talk about the DARE program, but before that, just to let you know that as we started our anti-Islamophobia work at CCMW, we saw so many incidents of hate, one after the other, spiraling. And really that made our work, really more important. So I'm going to begin with recognizing that there is grief all over, especially with what's happening in the Middle East. There is no condoning violence, but individual acts of violence are seen, sometimes systemic are not. So hoping that we are able to push for peace through effective dialogue, through effective communications. And I'm a big one for education. And I feel that, I've done these trainings, more than 100 workshops across Canada. And I really have seen hearts and minds change within a 2 or 3 hour workshop. So I'm hoping that we are able to keep this communication open and we can challenge each other today with care and empathy as we take on this topic. So maybe we can just go to the first slide. I just want to introduce myself. So again, I'm a project manager with the Canadian Council of Muslim Women. And besides being a staff there, I wear many hats. I'm a freelance writer. I used to be a journalist in Bombay. I continue to write, and it is Bombay. It's a political statement that it's not Mumbai. Next slide, please. And really just wanted to introduce CCMW to all of you that don't know about it. So it stands for Canadian Council of Muslim Women. And it was founded some 40 years ago by Dr. Laila Falman. And you can see this really, really empowering quote from her where she says, "I believe in what I'm doing and I believe it should be done." So she came together when she kind of found that, there were no spaces for Canadian Muslim women, both within Muslim communities and outside of it. And sometimes, we have to fight for the social justice, and collectively we can do a lot together. So she had a lens where, social justice activism through faith-based, through a faith-based organization. And that's how CCMW was born in 1982. And as you see, the 3 E's that are really, really important to us. So we work around equity, equality, and empowerment for Canadian Muslim women and girls, trans women, and non-binary people. Next slide, please. So again, these are all heavy words, but just just to make it a little light, is that our vision is that Canadian Muslim women are treated equitably and equally, and they feel equally empowered in Canadian society. And we do this through affirming our identities. So we all come with a lot of identities, a lot of intersections, and really, how do we explain these to others? We can do so with policy change. We inform policy and lawmakers. We share stories, and we kind of are a voice whenever there is social injustices towards Muslim women and women in general. We are there. An example being Bill 21 in Quebec, which I will talk about. Next slide, please. So we have lots of projects and programs at CCMW. So anything that impacts Canadian Muslim women and girls, we are there. So gender-based violence is, as you know, impacts a lot of women, impacts more racialized women because of poverty, because of homelessness, because of sometimes racism and Islamophobia that they face. So we have a gender-based violence support and prevention program at CCMW. We created a guide that can inform organizations that have Muslim women as clients or survivors or victims, that how you can change your policies to make them more equitable. This is one of the programs that we have. Next slide, please. Another project that I lead is really to understand what kind of barriers Muslim women face around employment. So we've heard some, good stories and some not so good stories around Muslim women and how they navigate employment. So what happens to them when they apply for jobs, when they are recruited, do they have ample opportunities for advancement and growth? And that is such a keen study, the results of which will be available to all of us sometime early 2024. And I hope to share it with all of you. Next slide, please. Besides this, Muslim women are impacted by a lot of family law issues. So we help them navigate the system. So we have information on divorce, on spousal and family support, on marriage, inheritance laws, etc. And these are all available on our website, which is ccmw.com. Next slide. So I'm just going to zero in on why we are here today. So, just took you through an overview of, what CCMW is and what we do. But really, one of the key issues that we combat or counter on an everyday basis is Islamophobia. And just to reiterate the definition by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, racism, stereotypes, prejudice, fear, or acts of hostility directed towards individual Muslims or followers of Islam in general. People also call it hate, towards Muslims or Muslim communities. And we do a lot, to counter this hate. And one of them is the DARE program. Next slide, please. So almost 4 years ago, we got funding from the federal government, and we launched the Digital Anti-Racism Education Program, which is now a project. So as you know, a lot of hate kind of transcends from offline to online spaces and vice versa. And this is such an alarming stats that police reported hate crimes across Canada increased 37% in 2020. This was from Stats Canada. And, everybody's aware about the 2017 Quebec mosque attack. And we as an organization thought something really needs to be done. Something needs to be done to counter Islamophobia, to debunk the myths and misconceptions that a lot of Canadians and global citizens have about Muslims and Islam in general. And the project was launched in 2019. Phase 1, and then we had another phase in 2020 where we developed a very, very robust and comprehensive anti-Islamophobia module. I'm happy to say that the module was developed by Amira Al-Gawabi, who is now our federal representative to combat Islamophobia. So it was very well thought, very well planned, and implemented with ease and care as we delivered the workshops to communities across Canada. We have had about 100 or more than 100 workshops that have trained about 6,500 Canadians on anti-Islamophobia and countering cyber hate. Next slide, please. So really, some people might say, okay, why do you need a program or a project like DARE, or why do you really need to even get into anti-racism work? And the stats are there for all of us to see. There was a report from the Canadian Race Relations Foundation some years ago, and it said 1 in 5 Canadians have experienced some kind of racism, some kind of hate. And I'm sure that, with all of you here, when we open it to Q&As, you can also put in your reflections to say, have you ever encountered something like this? I know that when I was new in Canada, I didn't even know it's kind of a hate crime or a hate attack. I just took it in my stride as a newcomer to say, oh, maybe this is what happens in the country that I've chosen to live. I am from Bombay, from India, and we dealt with a lot of casteism and classism over there. But really, when I came here, I found that racism was so in your face. It could be subtle, but many a times, if you're on a bus, people would refuse to sit next to you if you were dressed in a particular way. And so really now, I think I've been here for more than 20 years now, that people are finding the courage to really come out and speak about hate, about the racism that they are experiencing. Another glaring stats is 253% increase in hate crimes against Muslims. And you can see the year is that it's between 2012 and 2015. And this was not even when the Quebec mosque attack had happened. So really it was culminating and snowballing. The hate was there, and the evidence is there to see. And lastly, because we are also a women's-based organization, really important to know that 73% of women are abused online worldwide. It's such a glaring and alarming number. And really more to know that women aged 18 to 24, when they're really very, very vulnerable, some of our youngsters, our youth are taking to online and digital platforms. And what happens if they have a particular thought or they post something, immediately they are doxxed and trolled and abused online. We will talk about a campaign, and I'll talk a little bit more when we come to that. But really to be aware that the hate that we see offline many a times gets to online, and we must not just be bystanders, but actively, call out this hate that we see on these platforms. Next slide, please. So not to go a lot into it, but you all know that police-reported hate crimes in Canada have been increasing. So in 2020, a glaring 36% increase, and then in 2021, it increased 27%. And most of you know that police-reported hate crimes, 60 to 70% are not reported at all. Next slide. So I've been given the warning that I do have just a minute left. So again, not to go into it, but I just want you to look at 3 years of decline. But again, hate crimes motivated by religion peaked in 2021. Next slide, please. A very, a survey that we always look at. If you look at this, it kind of horrifies you to say Canadians have such, sentiments about Muslims. So 46% have an unfavorable view of Islam. 56% believe that Islam suppresses women's rights. So a lot. So next slide. I think I don't want to go through each, but this survey is by Angus Reid. It is available on Google for all of you all to read. Next slide, please. Again, this is the same survey. Next slide. And really Bill 21, and I'm sure that all of you are or have joined us in our fight against Bill 21. It's absolutely discriminating to all those who are from different religions, but those who are visibly Muslim, who wear the hijab, or someone who may be wearing a turban or other religious symbols. And we must join in this fight to combat and counter Bill 21 in Quebec. Next slide, please. So again, it's no wonder that 2 in 5 Canadians outside of Quebec hold an unfavorable view of Islam, and in Quebec that number is more than half. It's double. Next slide. So I think maybe I can stop here with the pyramid of hate. This is such an important image that, again, I speak about India. So people who are from different parts of the world, you maybe have seen biases, small biases that kind of lead to individual acts of prejudice, discrimination, bias-motivated violence, and then really swiftly rise to genocide. So I'll stop here to say that if we are not conscious about our pillars of democracy, our media, our judiciary, our legislature, we can really rise and go swiftly from the pink phase to the red phase. So let me end here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thank you for that really sobering and helpful introduction. And I'm excited to dig into lots of it. But first, I'll turn it to Shawn, and maybe Shawn, just give us a sense of what you work on at NCCM, and yeah, orient us a bit to what you're bringing to the discussion, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you so much, Sam, for having me here today, and thank you, Dais and TMU and all the esteemed guests who are the reason why we are having this event today. I'm extremely honored to speak here to all of you about the harms of online hate speech, respectively, to Islamophobia. So thank you for having me as a speaker. But before I get into this discussion, I would like to mention that although I'm physically here today with you guys on Zoom, I've just come out, or I don't know if I should say I'm still in, an extremely chaotic work week where we are working from morning to night on issues concerning the events taking place right now in Israel and Palestine and Canada's role in that. And to be honest, my mind has been very occupied with all what's happening. So please excuse me in advance if I have any shortcomings in answering any of your questions, or I'll do so in the best of my ability. So a bit about myself, like Sam has introduced me. I am Shawn. My name is Shawn Ullah. I work for NCCM, the National Council of Canadian Muslims. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, NCCM is a civil liberties group, fighting for human rights for Canadians with a specific mission to combat and address Islamophobia. A bit about myself. I was raised in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada all my life. I feel like a dinosaur just thinking about my elementary years, but I essentially went to a predominantly white elementary school. And growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood, that's kind of where I first experienced my first bouts with racism, or you could say kind of ignorance, for the first time. When you're at that age, many kids express when they're growing up, meeting new people who look different than them, or they may say things about my skin color, or a new skin color, I should say, that they've never seen before, or the way I dressed on certain occasions, like religious holidays or after Friday prayers. But the way I generally looked to them was obviously very different. But that was as far as things would generally go back then. I remember, it's kind of silly, but in first or second grade, one kid telling me that the color of my blood was different because I was brown. He said that my skin, my blood color was green and his was red. And I remember so desperately trying to convince him otherwise. But it wasn't until probably when I reached grade 5, shortly after 9/11, that I really started experiencing Islamophobia, which was really new term now, but it was coined, I think, just recently in the past decade or so. It wasn't a term that was there back then. It was just racism. But I was targeted essentially because of my religion. Everyone knew I was Muslim, and the education system didn't know how to handle it at that time. That really bothered me. I felt kind of failed by my superiors, my educators, my teachers, who were kind of meant to make me feel safe. But to their credit, I mean, the specific kind of racism identifying Islam with terrorism was new for the educators, and I always felt that when I grew up, I would address these issues, and it's kind of led me to where I am today, in some ways intentionally, and in other ways fate. However, the start of this was ages ago, at a time when we'd get home and watch our 6 o'clock news to get our kind of information about what's going on in the world. And obviously times have changed, we use social media now. And a lot of it we find on social media platforms like Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or even WhatsApp. And we get articles and these links sent by aunties and uncles, parents, friends who share videos with us and whatnot. And unfortunately, at times, these sources are not always regulated or fact-checked or vetted per se to see if they incite hate. And as a result, sometimes you have people posting misinformation, spewing hate speech. And although to someone who may carry privilege, they may feel, well, no big deal. It's all online, it doesn't affect us. Or we don't have to worry about it. But the truth is to the contrary. What starts out online comes out of the internet, comes into our daily lives. The information we absorb, that we internalize for what we read or we see online really affects how we interact with other people or how we perceive one another. It affects how we vote, who we vote for, which policies we support. It can affect how one sees an entire group or race of people. And a lot of people may not see this result due to maybe reporting of these events on social media or the news, also due to social media algorithms. It's very much dependent on what kind of people and accounts you follow. So I'm here today to talk about the facts that online hate speech does indeed spill over into our physical world, and speak specifically with reference to online speech, hate speech around Islamophobia, and how it really affects Muslim populations across the country today.
Amazing. Thank you, Shawn, for sharing. And let's get into the discussion. And again, just to the audience, questions are welcome in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you have something you want to ask our panelists, but I'll start. Let's maybe just orient our listeners here, for those who maybe don't know, how prevalent is this issue of Islamophobia and hate crimes here in Canada? Can you share some sort of stats or research that can orient our audience? And maybe I'll start with you, Shawn.
Absolutely. And I think Firdaus did an excellent job in her slideshow to kind of identify those stats and physically display them on the screen. So I hope that's kind of helped you have an idea of the numbers. But, Islamophobia is an extremely concerning issue, not only right here in Canada, but globally across the world. And aside from the major attacks and killings we've seen here in Canada, we can see that the surveys, the polls, that they produce numerous studies and reports, there's been an exponential increase in reported, and I say reported hate incidences because, they're not always reported. And it's increased surprisingly, to vast extents over the past couple of decades. And although it's common knowledge that we saw, after 9/11, a significant rise, I think a lot of people assume that, it died down, people are more well-informed now that not all Muslims are terrorists, but it's been quite the opposite. And I myself never anticipated it would get this bad. We compared the number of hate-motivated incidents against Muslims from 2012 to 2015, right around the time I think Donald Trump was running for his campaign. We saw a shocking 253% increase, and that was showed on Firdaus' slideshow, and it was extremely alarming. But the number of hate crimes didn't just kind of plateau there; they continued to go upward trajectory. Like Firdaus said, Stats Canada reported a 72% increase from 2020 to 2021. So for a community that makes up only 5% of the population, that really is a lot of hate to receive. It's a clear indicator of a very concerning and major problem. One thing to really keep in mind, like I mentioned about reported incidents, is a majority of hate crime incidents go unreported, about 90%, to give you an idea. And this is for numerous reasons. One mainly being police, discourage victims at times, advising them that, it's not going to go anywhere, or the victim just might not know that they can even report this to the police. A lot of times, we have Muslims who are immigrants who have certain barriers, and some people who don't even have those barriers just don't know that this is something that you can call the police on. But those are all issues that we're working very actively to address. The system needs fixing, and we're working with police boards and services across the country to make reporting more accessible and encouraged, and to ensure reporting hate crimes are happening more than before, so we can have more accurate numbers when we're coming to people like you to give this kind of information. I mean, outside hate crimes, there's been numerous opinions and polls, like Firdaus again has mentioned, that have shown that many Canadians don't hold a favorable view of Muslims, nor do they want to be allies of Muslims. I think nearly 40% have unfavorable views, and roughly 1 in 3 Canadians don't want to be an ally to Muslims at all. The prevalence of Islamophobia is there. The public body may not only hear or see such a small fraction of what exists, but trust me when I say there's a strong stench of Islamophobia looming in the country, and it's just so very sad.
Sobering summary. Thank you, Shawn. Firdaus, do you want to add here?
Yes, I think enough has been said, about the stats. The evidence is there to show us, but I just want to, reiterate what Shawn has said, that, this Islamophobia has left such a personal experience on all Muslims who are visibly Muslim and who are not. I had young sons who grew up in the post 9/11 era, and, being harassed, being called, suicide bombers, a lot of names, they kind of internalized Islamophobia, and in their, growing up years, they absolutely went away from the religion. They don't even call themselves Muslims, today. So it's so sad that the impact is huge. And, for those who have doubts or who challenge that, does Islamophobia really exist, and does it exist in a place like Canada? I want to tell you that it does. I'm not visibly Muslim, but I have a lot of friends and a lot of colleagues who wear the hijab, and the stories that they tell us, their experiences are like dumbfounding, that how can this happen in Canada? How can, all this take place? But it is. If you look at Edmonton, Black Muslim women are regularly attacked and trolled. They have to have safety measures when they, go to school and come back. So really, we are encountering quite a huge problem. Sometimes it's subtle, but since 2017, there have been so many incidents. The Afzal family in London, Mohammed Zafiz, who was killed outside the mosque in Rexdale. So I think the issue is not here to, reconfirm that Islamophobia is there, but like, how can we counter it? I think that's really more important to say, yes, it is here. It is very real. Every time an incident happens globally, there's a huge attack. That right now, I did see something on news. I think, Shawn, one of your staff members, was on the news channel, and really there is significant rise in Islamophobia even as we speak. So I think that the bone of contention here is what must we do as communities to come together to fight this hate.
Thank you. And I want to get to solutions quickly soon, but maybe I'll just first ask, again, for those maybe new to this discussion, what's a common misperception maybe that people have about Islam or Islamophobia as a topic, and what's the truth? Firdaus, you want to go first?
Yes, I will. So I think that it's just on my slide, and whoever is handling the slide, if you can just maybe just show slide 18, because that is such an important, topic. To say that, when we do these workshops or when we talk to people who have just heard about Islam or Muslims, they hold so many myths and so many misconceptions that we really need to debunk these. So first is that, Islam or Muslims are a monolith group, and, we all are the same. And in reality, we are absolutely diverse. There are so many sects in Islam, the Shias, the Sunnis. So although we are bound together, with our faith and our belief in one God, but the way we practice is different. And because Muslims are spread across the globe, culturally too, they are so different from each other. They speak different languages. Another myth that exists is that, Muslims want to remain separate. They want to kind of be the separate group, not wanting to do with, anything that the world has to offer. And again, that is so not true. We know that, Muslims have been contributing to society in so many ways. So we are integrated, we are interdependent, and also to know that, the first university was formed in Morocco by a Muslim woman. So, we are part of the civilization, part of education, and we have been and are in the forefront of everything that happens. It's also considered that Muslims are inferior. So, we've been given terms as terrorists, barbaric, and really, again, to show that there's a long history and legacy of contribution to human civilization, key roles that we have in Canadian society. So contributions to science, to mathematics, to coffee brewing, to so much more, is the legacy of many Muslims. Again, women, who wear the hijab or the niqab, they are seen as women who are oppressed. And again, that is absolutely not true. I have colleagues who wear it out of choice. That there are countries like Iran or Afghanistan, where women are forced to wear the hijab, and we absolutely acknowledge that. But then patriarchy is something that is existing in the world over, and we as Muslim women or women fight and challenge any of these oppressions that exist both within and outside our communities. So just to let you know that the women who wear the hijab today, many of them are wearing it due to their own agency and out of choice. Again, Muslims, it's very freely handed out that, if you're a Muslim, you're violent or you're used to violence, and that is the way you settle things, and that is absolutely not true. You have about 2 billion or 1.9 billion Muslims across the globe, and not everybody is violent, but when you have an incident that happens, the religion is always in the forefront when it is a Muslim. So Muslims are seen as actual or potential partners working for the benefit of all society and all communities. We are educators, we are teachers, we are doctors, and to acknowledge that and to celebrate us as well, as you see the negative news about us. Muslims are also considered to be manipulative and untrustworthy. So, this happened to me a lot in India. Every time I walked into a room, I grew up in a mixed group of Hindus, Christians, Muslims. But I think that, that mistrust of Muslims is always there, whether you're in India or outside. There's a hush sometimes when you walk into the room. People don't believe you for who you are. You have to work doubly hard. You have to be doubly convincing to them to say, I'm Muslim, I'm honest, I mean it. So that takes a lot out of you sometimes. So to know that Islam is a genuine faith and the followers practice it sincerely and not due to any manipulation or anything that they need. And again, it is considered that Muslims cannot take criticism. So that's again a myth, that Islam, if you read the history, has been formed by a lot of challenging each other, taking out practices which were not, which were, bad for women, the taboos in society, and coming up with something which was, appreciative and progressive 1400 years ago. So again, we are open to criticism. We want to improve just like any other community or society. So I'll end here to say, if you have myths or misconceptions, meet Muslims, meet Muslim women and men, find out what they're all about. They're studying, they're educating each other, they're working, and it's really sometimes just in your minds. And I think I mentioned that, when we did these workshops, I had someone from Ottawa. She was a middle-aged white woman, and when she completed the 2-hour workshop, she was almost in tears, and she said, post 9/11, I had so much grudges, so much prejudice against Muslims. I was hateful to someone on a train ride who was visibly Muslim, and I 20 years later apologize for being so. So I think that, ignorance really leads to hate and more hate. Come out, celebrate Muslims. If you have neighbors, friends, find out who they are. And I think that hate or those prejudices will be reduced if they don't go away altogether.
Thanks for that. And a very comprehensive answer. So Shawn, I don't know if Firdaus stole any of your thunder there, but do you have anything you want to add?
No, I do actually. You asked about misconceptions on Islamophobia. And well, for starters, the biggest misconception is that it doesn't exist. Like the Angus Reid poll that Firdaus pulled up, For March this year, they asked Canadians whether they think Canada has a problem with Islamophobia, and only 50% of Canadians said there was a problem, with the other 50% saying that Islamophobia was not a problem. So many Canadians think that Islamophobia is just some leftist liberal term coined to pander to the Muslim population and get their vote. But the sheer reality is it exists, contrary to what half the population may believe. The data of the exponential increase in hate crimes against Muslims and testimony of thousands of Muslims speaks loudly otherwise. I mean, we don't have to look very far in the past to see the enormity of the problem. In 2017, we had the Quebec mosque attack. A 27-year-old man, Alexander Bissonnette, went into a mosque and opened fire at Muslim congregants praying, killing 6 worshippers and wounding 19 others. Absolutely horrific. In 2020, the caretaker at the IMO Mosque in Toronto was stabbed to death right outside the mosque. And just 2 years ago, we saw the tragic killing of the Upsall family in London, Ontario. 4 members killed, leaving 1 son behind, a 6-year-old. He's now orphaned, who survived this. And mind I say, all of these perpetrators, each of them who perpetrated these attacks, they were all inspired by hate speech online. Investigations into their search history, their social media accounts, who they followed, what they were sharing, it all came back with hate speech on Muslims. So there was white supremacy and neo-Nazi ideologies there as well. And these are just the headlines that I've shared with you, Sam, and the audience here. You know, right now, there's countless acts of vandalism on mosques and other hate incidents that I have not mentioned, and I don't think I could cover in this span of time. But aside from misconceptions or the delusion per se that Islamophobia isn't a thing, another common one is that Islamophobia is just solely overt acts of violence towards Muslims. The truth is, Islamophobia has so many forms, like biases, stereotypes, microaggressions, things that Muslims face daily: social exclusion, verbal abuse, or systemic discrimination. And we see this in many different industries and institutions. It's also important to note Islamophobia is not limited to any one group, but it affects a diverse range of Muslims. Like Firdaus mentioned, we are very diverse, including women who wear the hijab, men with beards, and those from various culture backgrounds. And when I mention institutions, I mean, you know, we're seeing it in schools right now. Let me preface this by saying, you know, I hold a tremendous amount of love and respect for teachers. And sometimes it's just a lack of knowledge thing. But as the world is also ever changing, but there's been a trend on instances where teachers are the ones perpetuating Islamophobia and hate. And as we all know, that sets a horrible, extremely dangerous precedent for students to engage in hate. It's extremely concerning. That being said, organizations such as the one I work for, we're committed to addressing this, and we're working with schools who are very cooperative and boards proactively wherever we see incidences, and we're providing staff with education and training.
Amazing, thank you. And so you both have already kind of teased potential solutions, but I want to ask about that specifically. Here at the Dais, we're a public policy and leadership think tank focused on what we can do to solve the root of a problem with policy solutions. So what are some things that governments could do, public policy changes that we think would help it address you know, all of the challenges you've just laid out? Shawn, you want to start?
Sure, absolutely. So I mean, you know, we have some policy already, of course, in the criminal code and in terms of hate speech, but I think it comes down to really implementing stronger anti-discrimination, anti-hate legislation that specifically addresses online hate speech and harassment, and strengthening these and properly enforcing these existing hate crimes laws is really important, because what we're seeing a lack of here, especially where I work right now, a lot of the cases that come by our desks are that the law enforcement isn't enforcing these laws. You know, they're not being addressed as they should be. Another thing that, you know, in terms of public policy is, like, you know, increasing public awareness through education. So, you know, making the policy for institutions to, you know, educate and maybe even push community initiatives to challenge the stereotypes and promote inclusion. Encouraging social media platforms to adopt more stringent policies against hate speech, like Meta, you know, Facebook, Instagram, but also while doing so, you know, recognizing freedom of speech. You know, we're noticing that there's not a balance there. I can speak more to that, later, but we're noticing a huge censorship. But those are some policies I think that we can start off on.
Amazing. Okay. And I want to hear more about kind of enforcement and working with the police, which I know you've mentioned a couple of times, but I'll come back to it. So Firdaus, why don't you go next?
I think that, policy change is absolutely important, but I also believe that, let's start with ourselves, right? That's how I see it. Let's start with us unlearning the racism, unlearning the hate that we see. I sometimes, we've interacted with schools and, young kids, young children, and really, the education system sadly is a place where, racism is in subtle and very overt ways is being taught, and I'm hoping that we have the time to show the video that is on one of my slides, because there's a young Muslim girl, and she talks exactly about this as to how teachers, in the school perpetuate Islamophobia. Or other forms of racism. And sometimes, you don't have to make or do an action or say something. Even if you're silent, if you're not doing anything about all the hate that is happening around you, that is a form of racism. I think that is a form of Islamophobia. And children learn through that, to say, okay, this happened, the teacher was silent, or the powers that we were silent. That is almost like an encouragement to the haters and those who are, doing acts of racism. So I'm hoping, Sam, if there is time for us to see that. And I think policy-wise, I think, let's call out hate. Let's not be selective about who, what kind of hate gets called out. Let's call out hate attacks, all for what they are. And I think that's really when the real change is going to happen.
Love it. And yes, we'll do it before the break at 7. I think we'll play the video then if that works. But maybe Shawn, can I hot pursuit on what you mentioned about working with the police and improving enforcement of the laws that do exist? How is that going? I imagine it's kind of police force by police force, but do you want to give us kind of some more color on that work?
Yeah, so a lot of the work we're doing with police, essentially enforcing these laws, are more so around in-person laws. We've tried to, like hate crimes that happen physically in person. A lot of the stuff that we're seeing online, we've had a lot of conversations about with different boards, such as the Edmonton Police Service, the Peel Board, as well as there's various boards across the country. But we're noticing that we're receiving good feedback for the most part. Like you mentioned, Sam, it changes board to board, right, or service to service, force to force. Each one, has their own perspective or own way of handling things, and that's kind of what makes it a bit difficult. Is each province or each force has different way of handling things, but generally we've received positive feedback in terms of making an initiative, an effort to address these things more concretely.
Awesome. Okay. Final question, and then we'll watch the video and take a short break at 7. Are there things that other jurisdictions, other countries or other provinces, outside of Ontario, where we're based here, are doing that we think we could learn from? Are there, best practices that you're inspired by kind of globally? Maybe I'll start with you, Firdaus.
I think one thing that's lacking, Sam, that I have seen because of these trainings that we've done is, especially law enforcement or educators, really sometimes if it's not made mandatory for them to take such trainings, they come with a totally different lens. They may not know what coming from a war-torn country is all about, or the racial coding or profiling of young Muslim men post 9/11 and the impact that it had or continues to have on them. So I feel that, all these trainings that I mentioned, this is not just like 1 or 2 hours on the computer, but you really get to listen from victims and survivors of hate. And really that changes the way that you sometimes see and do things. So I think that, anti-Black racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Islamophobia, the anti-Asian hate that we saw during the pandemic, all these are, continuums of the same thread, continuums of the same hate. And really, if we are not informed enough, if we don't refresh our training, hate looked totally different maybe 10 or 20 years ago. Now it's vicious, it's online. There is a campaign that we did called Hate to Healing, and we did a call out for young Muslim women and girls to come out and share their stories of hate. And we were appalled to see how many submissions we got. And I particularly remember one video that we've done. It's the experience of Noor Fadel. She's from Vancouver. That video exists on our website. I will put it in the chat. But really, she spoke about, she was visibly Muslim, wearing the hijab on a SkyTrain in Vancouver. She was attacked, physically attacked. And she took to her online community. She thought, when she shares this experience, she will get a lot of compassion, a lot of care and sensitivity on the online platform. And she was appalled to see that all those who were considered to be her online community were trolling her and doxing her and blaming her for the hate that she received. So just to let you know that this hate is very real. The online is as vicious as offline. We have seen a recent incident where misinformation has led to the killing of a young child, a young Palestinian Muslim child in the US. So I think that collectively, with a lot of good information is the only way I feel that we can really unlearn this hate, educate ourselves, and move forward.
Thank you. Shawn?
Yeah, I mean, we other places around the world, I know some countries and provinces, or well, countries specifically, have some promising policies to combat speech and hate speech and Islamophobia. For example, I know in Germany they have some stringent laws against hate speech and Holocaust denial, with steep penalties for violations. Additionally, the UK has taken steps to hold social media platforms accountable for harmful content through the online harms white paper. So these models can serve as a potential inspirations, but I mean, there's also the same countries have also tried to put in more stringent laws about general hate speech online. They've gotten a lot of backlash, and I think that comes with people trying to balance freedom of expression, which is really tough because those will be the biggest critics. People who of course we all admire freedom of expression. I think protecting freedom of expression is essential, but it's also equally important to ensure a safe and inclusive online environment for everybody else. Critics often express concerns about overreach and censorship, but it's possible to strike a balance. Measures like clear definitions of hate and speech oversight and the involvement of legal experts can help ensure a fair and just process. One thing that we at NCCM really advocated for to kind of strike that balance was using the Walcott standard as kind of a benchmark. The Walcott standard, for those who don't know, is a framework for hate speech set by an old court case in Saskatchewan, which ruled that speech that promotes hatred against particular groups based on factors like race, religion, or sexual orientation can be restricted by law if it poses a risk or a harm, such as inciting discrimination or violence. So at the same time, we recognize, and we are today, I would be remiss to say, not acknowledge, and you acknowledge what's going on in the Middle East. There's been a rise of anti-Semitism, which is horrible. There's been a rise of Islamophobia. We've seen 1,250% increase over the past week in hate incidences. But at the same time, it's if we don't have these clear definitions, we're seeing censorship, especially the Muslim community right now. If they're sharing information about, say, for example, here, without going into any details, but just about lives lost in Gaza right now, that's being taken down. It's being censored as hate speech. So these definitions are really important, very, very much important.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we can dig into that in the break. I'm conscious of time, and Firdaus, we promised we would let you play the video. So if we can cue that up and hear that, and then we'll take a short 5-minute break and come back to answer your question. But yeah, take it away.
I was born and raised in Canada to a Pakistani Muslim family. The biggest incident of Islamophobia that I've gone through was in the 2nd grade. I remember feeling really scared but also happy because it was the first time she had smiled at me. I continue to experience a lot of Islamophobia and racism in elementary and high school. The teacher would just sit there and stare at me. She would not intervene. I thought it had something to do with me, and of course that meant I had to change. I do remember feeling frustrated as students around me discussed my religion without any proper knowledge about it. I'm a firm believer in the fact that hate is taught. I don't think it's anything that someone is inherently born with.
So Sam, I included a shorter version just to in the essence of time, but a longer version of this video is on our website. Again, I was just putting it in the chat. But really, this is a story of Noreen, again, a young girl from Quebec, and she talks about how, again, teachers just turned a deaf ear every time she walked in, and this is post 9/11, calling them suicide bombers, etc., and how this perpetuated to hate, how they were given the Bible, although she told that she is a Muslim and she reads the Quran. So many systemic changes really need to happen at this level, but also at the individual level, to say you are a teacher, you are an educator, and you have to be this advocate for social justice, let's find ways of how we can do this together. So apologies, this is the shorter version. I just put that, but there's I will put the link in the chat if anybody wants to watch the full one. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 7:05 to answer questions that you post to us, and maybe a few more. Thanks, everybody. You can take a stretch, and we'll be back at 7:05 Eastern. Thanks. We'll go and ask some of the questions from you all. So the first one is from Anson. I hope I'm saying that right. And do you find any takeoffs or political policies have improved to protect Muslims currently? I think maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but asking about what policies could be put in place to protect Muslims. Maybe I'm apologies, Anson, if I'm misunderstanding it. But Shawn and Firdaus, do you have any kind of opening reflections on Anson's question? Oh, you're muted, Shawn.
Sure. Do I apologize. I haven't used the Q&A. Do I click answer live in the Q&A, or do I just
No, you just go ahead and speak.
Okay, so I mean, in terms of policies, and if that's, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of policies that need to be strengthened, and I think the onus is on the government to really provide details on that. But in terms of what's taken off, nothing has. We've been advocating for a few years to the governments for stronger policies and to strengthen the criminal code to combat online hate. And we haven't seen any action. There's been no action yet, just promises. And that's something where it's concerning for us because, whenever a politician or government makes promises, it's important for them to be held accountable that they uphold those promises. So as of now, we've seen nothing.
Firdaus, you want to add anything?
Yes, I just want to add and take us back to a time when you had the Mississauga Erin Mills MP Kura Khalid. She was in the news a lot, and she really had the vision, and she tabled a private member's motion. It was called M103, and she was actually calling upon the federal government to eliminate Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination. And really, it's such a natural thing because we do know that Islamophobia exists in many forms. it's spreading, it's increasing. There's sharp rises, alarming rises, in fact, anytime an incident happens in the global context. And when she tabled this bill, it of course did not get passed, but she got no less than 50,000, I believe, threat messages, a lot of furor, from within the community and outside. And really, for me, this was such a non-issue, such a non-brainer to say, of course, this must be passed. But it, of course, was put down. So I would say that that was one of the success stories that did not happen. But then, organizations like NCCM, like CCMW, and many others have been fighting and advocating against Islamophobia, against many forms of racism. So I think the win that I can see, 2 or 3 wins are, one is that the Peel District School Board actually embraced, or was the first school board to embrace, the anti-Islamophobia strategy. So they really have a strategy in place. They have a plan to implement and to roll it out. So anytime a child experiences an Islamophobic attack, or is a target of one, there are policies in place. Teachers know what to do, with it. And I think TDSB is the second board that has followed. So I think I see that as a success. And I think the other win that I see in the work that we do is that you now have a federal representative, Amir Al-Gawabi, to combat and to counter Islamophobia. So besides, I think, a recent campaign that was launched in October during Islamic Heritage Month, a lot is being done, from her end, bringing communities, bringing organizations together to fight Islamophobia and to be allies to our work. So I'll stop there. But yes, we have seen a change. A lot more needs to happen. I really believe that the online hate legislation, which is really dragging feet, it's getting stalled every time. We really need to push, we need to advocate for it to be passed, just because, we need to hold social media companies accountable. If you look at Twitter, or X as it is called now, it's horrifying to see, like there was a farmers movement in India. I'm sorry, I'm taking you back to my home country, but Twitter actually, this was the only platform where they could organize and they could mobilize, and they were shut down. And if you see on Twitter, there is so much of hate, so much of lynchings of Muslim men, and so many graphic videos that continue to be there, and nothing is being done about it. So I think that it's really time that we work together to hold our social media companies accountable to counter the hate, because we do see that the white supremacists, terrorists who have attacked mosques or other faith-based institutions have really been influenced by the dark web, the manifestos that live online, and they get so influenced by it that they find that it is time to act out. Even what happened to the Afzal family recently, the perpetrator was in the news, and he said he was really influenced, and with what was happening to him personally, he was reading so much online, and he had to take out that hate somewhere, and he found the Afzal family. So really, we need to work on that legislation and make sure that it is passed.
And sorry, I just wanted to apologize. I was trying to hop in here and add on. I was speaking strictly with policy to government. Yes, there wasn't change, but like Firdaus had mentioned, she's absolutely right. We've been working with school boards, we've been working with police departments, we've been working with a lot of different institutions, and they have been adopting anti-Islamophobia policy.
Maybe I'll just hot pursuit the piece about social media and incorporate one of the questions in our chat here about just that balance, Shawn, that you mentioned about asking social media platforms and online platforms to take action about hateful content, while at the same time protecting marginalized communities, including Muslim communities, but not exclusively, from censorship. And the current context we're in right now, I think, is a really real example of that, as you say, where hashtags that are pro Hamas are getting censored, but people are using them for things that are broader than that. And so just as one example, so I guess I wanted to get your views about this tricky stuff for the government to kind of legislate. Shawn, you offered sort of clear definitions as a potential way forward, but are there other considerations, I guess, that you want to sort of expand upon about how to walk that balance. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? A bit of a loaded, meandering question. I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
but
No, you were very clear. And just to give some context here, you know, I think the government could really have worked with Meta and these large organizations who essentially are the owners of the platforms that we use on social media right now. But since, you know, Bill C-18, the Online News Act, there's been a lot of tension. And it's being really hard now for them to communicate and hold one another accountable. Now, the thing with, like I mentioned earlier about the WCAT standard and ensuring that, you know, there's a balance between freedom of speech and hate speech, and what is considered hate speech. And, you know, if something is going to incite violence, or harm on somebody, absolutely, that should be removed. If something even per se leads to inciting violence or spews that kind of hate, that should be removed. But right now, like as you mentioned, Sam, like we are in a different climate. The events that happened on October 7th were heinous. They were horrible. The entire situation is horrible. Lots of lives are being lost, and I get, like I said, I don't want to go into it because it's a very sensitive topic for many communities, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, and just cultural communities in general. But what we're seeing right now is on platforms like Facebook and Instagram is something called shadow banning, and people who are there's not even hashtags being used. People are just sharing, you know, this is what's happening in this country, whether it's Israel or Gaza, specifically Gaza, and these are how many people have been killed. These are, you know, these are corroborated facts by whether it's the UN or other organizations or Amnesty in terms of numbers. This is footage that's available. And it's just very real facts, but they're being taken down as hate speech. Anybody who kind of speaks out in favor of Palestine or Gaza or the people of Gaza, they're being reprimanded, they're being blocked, and they're being removed, or their viewers are being shunned down. Now, a lot of this there's a lot of conflation, you know. We're seeing politicians in Canada right now going out of their way to conflate protests against, you know, the bombardment and the war on Gaza as being pro-Hamas. So I mean, when you have people saying things like that and conflating people who just want peace, who want an end to the violence, or as pro-Hamas, and you have that notion going around, well, it adds, you know, it really pushes, it fuels a fire to Islamophobia. And that's kind of why we've been seeing, we're having our 9/11 moment right now. The 9/11 that we had in 2001, where there's all this rhetoric against Muslims, and we're facing hate, we're being spit on, we're being circled around. We're having incidents here in Edmonton today and yesterday where people are being abused, threatened, and physically like assaulted, or, you know, and police has to come to intervene. We're having that moment right now, and essentially, you know, censoring Muslims, talking about things that are important to us, while in no way inciting harm against other people, is a contribution to Islamophobia. And we need to set that standard, that WCAT standard that we've been advocating for quite a long time, you know, that there's the freedom of speech. And let me say, you know, there's people who are saying things bad about Muslims, but we acknowledge, you know, that, okay, even though this might be their opinion, and it might be, we might not like it, but is it really harming us? Is it actually harming us? They say something they don't agree with about Muslims or Saudi Arabia or anything for that matter, Muslim countries. Is it harming us? If it's not, then it's not hate speech. So really defining that is very important.
Thanks, and I appreciate all of that. Firdaus, do you want to add to that?
No, I'm fine. I think I agree with what Shawn is saying. Nothing further to add.
Okay. I might, unless there are more questions coming in, ask you, Firdaus, maybe just then a follow-up about the presentation you gave and the work you do. You mentioned kind of working with school boards, that the Peel board has been kind of a standout. For those who are, kind of listening, who are engaged in education, what advice do you have to educators about kind of incorporating learning about Islam and Islamophobia into their work? And are there barriers? You called out Quebec as an example. How's the work going in Quebec? I guess I just wanted to give you space to talk a bit more about the education side, which we haven't discussed a lot yet tonight.
I say that, the schools are, really integral to the work that we do. It's kind of the foundation for our kids, where they learn a lot of things, but they also learn racism. So Quebec is kind of, I hope that it is just one of the provinces and it does not spread. But, I did a story where I think her name was Fatima Anwari, a teacher who was wearing the hijab in Quebec, was taken off the school premises for wearing the hijab. So as you know, Bill 21 does not allow you, if you're wearing any religious symbol, to be in public service. So, when kids are seeing this, what kind of example are we setting? There are so many Muslim women who are, educators who are training to be teachers. When they see this, it's kind of a direct attack on them to say, if you're wearing the hijab, that there are no jobs for you. And so really they are moving out of the province. There's a huge exodus right now for women who are visibly Muslim and want to work in public service in Quebec. But I also say that, Peel has put together the strategy and is implementing it. I say kudos to that. I think all boards should be mandated to follow suit, for anti-Islamophobia, but all forms of racism, whether it's anti-Semitism, anti-Black racism. And really, sometimes I have a few teachers in my family, and they say that, when we have kids or even other teachers who are perpetuators of hate or of racism, there's really nothing that they can do, like there are no policies that they can implement. Sometimes they kind of go to the principal. But I think that, what really needs to be done, again, I take it back to training, is that, if you have policies in place, if you are training your teachers, they kind of have that lens, that anti-racism lens, which is so important. We all come, from different parts of the world. I remember as a young mother, when I used to go to my son's school, I would wear the traditional Indian dress. And I really was looked down upon, by the administrators. I remember one meeting with my son's teacher, and seeing me wearing that dress. The first thing he asked me, without even knowing who I was, do you need an interpreter or a translator? And I was like horrified. I said, I'm a journalist from India. I write in English. So these are the assumptions, that educators have of racialized communities or have of racialized women. So I can't even imagine if that woman would have been someone in hijab. Would he have thought that she, is not able to represent herself, maybe? So I think that, let's start this education with our educators. That's how I feel. Let's start this training with them. Let them have the anti-racism, anti-oppressive lens, with training. Let's get these refresher trainings to them. Let's give it also to our frontline staff, because these are the first people that young parents, newcomers, refugees see in our schools. It's a great place of learning. And I think that if we have these trainings in place, if these are mandated, if policies are there, then when you come to my age, you don't have to unlearn racism. Like it's really, really difficult when you have, you think in a certain way. And then at my age, I'm 55, I'm very proud of my age, but I feel that when I tell my age group to think differently, to do things that are different, it's very difficult. That change does not happen easily. So I feel let's make our schools a hub of change. Let the change happen here.
Amazing. Okay, we're running out of time, so I'll give you both just an opportunity to any closing thoughts or remarks if you have them, or a parting thought. Maybe Shawn, I'll start with you.
Yeah, to just kind of in closing, education, like Firdaus has mentioned, is super important. So when people hear about, and organizations like NCCM or other organizations wanting to implement an anti-Islamophobia strategy in your school, or you're hearing people talk about this, no, it's to save lives. It's not, we're not asking for any special privileges here. We're not asking to be the center, or or to change your kids' minds about religion. It's strictly to prevent further lives from being taken. And if you are a Muslim and you are looking for ways to combat Islamophobia or change the way Islam is seen, then my advice to you is to really follow your dreams. Follow your passions, be who you are, get that job that you really wanted to have since you were a kid, because it's really, really important to have Muslims in all industries, in all professions, because the best way that you can dispel Islamophobia is by just being a good Muslim, a good person, and, leading by example, showing people who you are. And like I said, some people just don't have the knowledge. So when you're in these different industries and you're having these conversations with people, that's the best way to talk about these things. And if you are experiencing Islamophobia yourself, I know there is an Islamophobia hotline that just opened up. I will put it in the chat. It's an Islamophobia legal assistance hotline, as well as NCCM. That's what our organization does. You're more than welcome to reach out to us, and we can try to assist as well. I know I was reading somewhere, it might have been in here, I saw that some people are facing Islamophobia right now at work, given the climate. Reach out to us. We'll do our best to help. And if you're facing hate crimes, again, go to the police. It's very important that you go to the police and you report the hate crime, regardless if they say that, hey, so-and-so may not get charged, or they're not sure what the outcome may be. Go to the police, report that hate crime. It's important that we have that data, and it's important that it gets resolved, first of all, but also it's important for us to have that data to make change so that we can prevent these hate crimes from happening further.
Thank you, Shawn. Firdaus.
Yes, Sam. So I'll end on two notes. One is that there was a question that, considering what's happening in Gaza and Israel, there are some people who have lost their jobs or who have received disciplinary action for their thoughts and for posting on social media. So they're saying what can be done if employers retaliate. I would say use social media for the good, this is really the place where social media needs to be used. And I think that there's one recent story. I live in Markham, so a Markham Public Library, where there was a call by someone from the library to, put down all celebrations around Islamic Heritage Month. And this was called out. I'm so happy it was, that it was posted on social media and elsewhere. And I believe that those who are responsible for it had to apologize. So I think that social media has great good power also. We do have misinformation, disinformation, but it can be used for the good. It's viral, it's immediate, it's electrifying, and it can cause results in a jiffy. So that is my advice. And I had another question to say, when I mentioned that, the best way to get rid of your myths and misconceptions and prejudices is really to go and say hi to your Muslim neighbor or someone, your Muslim teacher, anybody that you're interacting with. Go and meet them, find out what they're all about, have coffee or lunch with them. And some of those myths will be debunked. So the question I had was, can we go to the mosque? And really, I would say it's better to go and meet your neighbor, your friend. Sometimes, I am critical about the mosques. They can tend to get to be very male-dominated spaces, or spaces that are not friendly towards women. So a lot of improvisation needs to happen at our mosques. I acknowledge that. So if you are going to a mosque, I would say go to the right one. The two that I can think of are Unity Mosque. It's a space that is also LGBTQS friendly. And there is the Noor Cultural Center, which is really a progressive mosque that celebrates all religions, all cultures. So go there. They have active programming throughout the year. So those are two that I can think of. And really getting rid of the hate is the only way forward. Trust me, there's no other way. So let's celebrate ourselves. Let's celebrate who we are. Let's pray that the Middle East conflict really gets resolved. There are peace solutions, but do your own, take responsibility for yourself, right? Like your actions, if you see hate, don't stay silent. I have stayed silent in my early years out of fear of losing a job or of losing something else. And really, there is nothing more precious than holding on to your identity and to calling out hate. This is the best bystander effect that you can have, and it has a ripple effect. You know, if you stand up for someone that you see being trolled or abused online, you will find so many like yourselves coming in support and calling out the haters. So don't shy away from that, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm reminded in your comments of the Martin Luther King quote, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And I think you both exemplified a lot of that tonight. So thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it on, as I say, a time when you, I know, are distracted and consumed by a lot of other things. And so we really appreciate you taking the time. And for everyone for listening in. Where to find Shawn and Firdaus. You can find them both on LinkedIn, and Firdaus's Twitter is there as well. And so feel free to connect with them if you're interested. And please join us for this continuing series of ours talks on anti-racism. We have one on anti-Black hate online on Wednesday, November 1st at noon. And we're the final part of the series is about environmental racism and Indigenous communities on Tuesday, November 14th at 6. And you can find those on our website or dais.ca or on Eventbrite. And finally, next week, we have Olivia Chow coming to TMU. You know, Shawn mentioned politicians saying divisive things. Olivia Chow, I think, is on that list. So you can ask her questions about that next week on October 25th, Wednesday at 2 p.m. At our Democracy Forum with Martin Redge-Conn. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Shawn. Sam, I'm so impressed. We started off with 30 and now we are at 25 people. So we still had people, you know, had their attention and they're still there. So thank you so much for doing a fabulous job of moderating. And thank you, Shawn, as well. Take care.
Thank you. And thanks, everyone, for being here. Take care.
Bye.